The time has come for my people to go.
I'm not a queen, I'm a servant of the people. I'm not a king, I'm a servant of the people. It's what the people demand, and we gonna keep fighting till we get that land. I'm not a queen, I'm a servant of the people. I'm not a king, I'm a servant of the people. It's time to rise, to get what we want, we got to organize.
Greetings all, this is our first episode of Pantsula Podcast, and we are repping the All African People's Revolutionary Party. There are actually several podcasts, we are just another added, and the All African People's Revolutionary Party is with the one objective of having a unified socialist Africa. And we have been doing that since 1968. And we're going to continue to do that till we all leave this earth. And I personally, I am Jamila. I am very optimistic. It may not be in my lifetime, but I am very optimistic that we are going to see total liberation of Africa through scientific socialism. We'll definitely put some information about the A-APRP in links and everything if you want more information. This is a tool of sharing information. This is a tool of speaking with folks we respect and admire in our respective communities to talk about the work we're doing and ultimately to organize the masses of the people. This is the goal of anything we're doing. And we are definitely appreciative of Jarrett Ball being here. We will get to an introduction in a moment. I do want to talk about Pantsula. So we named this podcast Pantsula. Pantsula is actually a dance which was formulated in Azania, aka South Africa, as a resistance to the apartheid regime. So we are using art as a means of resistance, and we feel that dedicating whatever art we do and whatever we do in our lives to those resistance movements and organizing, like, it's literally the effective way of fighting these systems. So if this podcast can contribute to anything in relation to the resistance, like, we're here. So thank you, Jared. And Jeffrey, if you want to go and introduce Jared.
Yeah, so today we have a part of our first episode, Dr. Jared Ball. He's a father, a husband, and also a professor of communications at Morgan State University. He's also the founder and curator of mixwhatilike.org. He's also known for his two great works that I personally love, A Lie of Reinvention. I'm going to really quickly plug that in, with him and his co-editor, Todd Stephen Burrows, and most famously known, The Myth and Propaganda of the Black Buying Power. So we're very glad to have Jared Ball as our first guest, and welcome on board, Jared.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. And if I can, just one quick happy update. I am now I'm actually now the inaugural faculty member in the evolving African and African American Diaspora Studies program at Morgan. So not in communications anymore, although that is where my doctorate is from. But the before that is Africana Studies. So I'm very happy to be back in Africana Studies. So
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. It's like into
we have so many questions for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We are looking forward to this conversation. So one of the things I really want to talk with you about, because I know you do identify as a Pan-Africanist, and I know that you resonate with Kwame Ture, who was one of the original organizers of the A-APRP with Kwame Ture and with Kwame Nkrumah, with Sekou Ture. So one thing I did hear you say was that you had a race-first analysis, but you also included class in that. So I'm interested in you expounding upon that, because for us, land is first. So I'm just really curious. And so we have some Malcolm X quotes as well, because we are going to speak to Malcolm X. So what Malcolm X says is revolution is based on land. Land is the basis of all independence. Land is the basis of freedom, justice, and equality. He also says the cry of the Black man in Africa for the return of his own land is so widespread, so unrelenting, so uncompromising. And he also says, in terms of an international analysis based on land and a class analysis, the only way we'll get freedom for ourselves is to identify ourselves with every oppressed people in the world. We are blood brothers to the people of Brazil, Venezuela, Haiti, Cuba, yes, Cuba too. So what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I fully agree. And and as I say, I guess the shortest version would be that when I say that I'm race first, I mean, it's a revolutionary nationalism as far as I understand it. So it's not that I'm race, it's race first. It's not necessarily race all and race last. And then I also make the point that it's not that it's not to be taken without criticism, and that I acknowledge that I have in many ways been shaped by the racist colonial experience here in the United States. And without becoming too autobiographical, I have not been able to live 1 second of existence without racial classification playing an ever-present role in my life. So it's not that I'm so it could be argued that I have been shaped by that experience. I sometimes joke I've been beaten down by this white supremacist world to the point where I can't start an analysis without starting from that point. So it's not even so that's anyway, but I don't disagree with anything that Malcolm said, and ultimately I agree with the analysis of Kwame Ture. But as I understood him to be doing it as well, I mean, he was arguing that this was the way for African people to get free and to develop a world for African and Black people and communities to exist and sustain in peace and harmony once a revolution had, hence the scientific socialism part, once revolution had occurred. So it's not anyway. So that it's just that I obviously we need land, and as John Henrik Clarke used to say, Black tells you how you look, but it doesn't tell you where you're from. All identity has to lead back to land, history, and culture, and I agree with that. So I just say I'm starting with this, where I've been shaped racially in this country, in the United States, and then from there I try to find the most militant and revolutionary analysis. So it is where I enter, but it's not necessarily where I stay. And I certainly think we need many other components of the analysis, including class, and of course, land has to be, what the fight is ultimately for.
Yeah, I definitely agree. So I know, just in the same vein as the land question, I know you mentioned in your book, and you discussed land a little bit in the myth and propaganda of Black buying power. We hear a lot of the times from the African petty bourgeoisie about us taking land and owning land, but just to quote from your book, you said it only takes the top 5 white landowners to eclipse all of the land owned, which is less than 1% of all U.S. land by all of Black America combined. You also elaborated on how 98% of the land in America is owned by white families. So with that being said, I guess it's kind of a twofold question. How do we tie this in with the indigenous folks? Because we know this isn't our land, and also how the media shapes the fact that we should be, Black people, African people in this country should be looking to buy land as well.
One of the points in terms of solutions and what we need to do, I don't entirely know, and I'm still trying to figure ultimately all of those conversations have to pieces. What I was just trying to point out in the book is that we're told all the time, instead of buying clothes, we should be saving up for, and buying land and stock and all this other stuff. But it is really a fantasy that's pushed to protect the mirage of capitalism, and the hope for people to overcome their circumstance within capitalism. So if again, the whole point of the myth of Black the myth and propaganda of Black buying power is just to make the point that we are provided mythologies so that we are discouraged and dissuaded and distracted from what we need to be focused on, or how, in this case, how the economy works. So the part I left out of the book that I try to bring up in these conversations as much as possible, sort of related to your first question, is that the part that's left out of all of the discussion almost all the time is that the first step in accumulating wealth is the military conquering of land and resources, or what Fanon called colonialism. So you can't say to one group that has been colonized to do that in order to close the gaps between themselves and the colonizer, they have to only follow part of the plan that accumulated wealth to the colonizer, which is to say, Black people are told to set up businesses, save their money, in this case, buy land, and there's no land to buy. And the land that's available can't be, developed and evolved upon to create wealth at the rates that people fantasize will close these divides and gaps between Black and white people. So, I mean, if land is going to be redistributed, we have to look to one of the, some of the movements and histories of the places you even mentioned earlier, for instance, Cuba, or in South Africa, or throughout Southern Africa in general, where there have been attempts to redistribute land. And you can see what has happened, whether it's Zimbabwe or South Africa, without a revolutionary process, which has not occurred in either of those two countries, despite the mythologies of Mandela and all of that. You don't get the land redistribution and the redistribution that the land produces, of the wealth that land produces, that you see in Cuba, which did have a revolutionary process. And that was the point. The land reform required a redistribution of the land from the wealthiest to everyone else, whether through ownership or enjoying the fruits of what the land produces. And that's not what has happened here or in the other parts of the world that I just quickly mentioned. So, and I do hate it when as you pointed out, the African petty bourgeoisie come out. They're the first ones often who are sent out to tell Black people to buy land and invest in stock. And it's absurd at this point. It's absurd.
Yeah. Then there's definitely been various, for lack of a better term, attempts, for example, in Zimbabwe for rent reclamation, and of course in Azania, South Africa, but of course the nature of imperialism and neocolonialism and installing coups, like there have been various attempts. And I think with the notion of identity, again, with a class analysis and a land analysis, and so there are going to be a lot of quotes from El-Haj Malik El-Shabazz here, because we're going to get to the book, but just in terms of an American identity. And he very much says straight up in the Ballad of the Bullet, I am not an American. He does not identify as such. I know he has used the term Afro-American to refer to the masses of Africans in the US, but he understands, or understood, and perhaps, wherever he is still understands, the notion of nationalism and identity. So there's a big difference when you have folks in revolutionary communities being like, all nationalisms are the same, when that's clearly not the case. Nationalist movement from colonized people is very different than a nationalist movement from people who are colonizers. And so when Malcolm X says, I'm not American, I'm one of the 22 million Black people who are the victims of Americanism, one of the 22 million Black people who are victims of democracy, nothing but disguised hypocrisy. So I'm not standing here speaking to you as an American or a patriot or a flag saluter or a flag waver. No, not I. I am speaking as a victim of this American system, and I see America through the eyes of the victim. I don't see any American dream. I see an American nightmare. And so when people say I'm an American, because when I'm having conversations with people, I say, no, I don't identify as American, because it's not simply a place you reside. It comes with a set of ideologies which are rooted in capitalism, which are rooted in exploitation of labor, The foundation of this country is based on all of those things. So if you identify as an American, I'm just speaking in general, like you're also tied to particular sets of standards and ideologies. So it's funny having these conversations because people are like, oh, and one man actually said to me, well, should I identify as Irish? And I'm like, better than American. And then there's even a movement against colonialism right now against the British. So why not identify as Irish? So for us, we stand with any anti-colonialist movement, whether you're Irish, whether you're Palestinian, whatever it is. But for us, America represents just world domination, if you want to call it that. And with this notion of what Malcolm X was talking about and his notion of Pan-Africanism, because with Cuba, there is a growing African pride there. Yes, there were a lot of errors and it was acknowledged. And then of course, with Brazil, the largest African population outside of the continent is in Brazil. So there's very much, when Malcolm X speaks to this, not just the land question, but the nationalism question when it comes to colonized people around the world. So what are your thoughts around that?
Well, I mean, that was sort of the point I was getting at before, that to me, as I interpret it, Malcolm was doing what I'm attempting to follow in his footsteps. That is, you start with your own place and identity. So he started with, I'm a Black man in the United States. And then you keep pushing the revolutionary logic of that. Okay, well then wait a minute, I'm not really a citizen, I'm a colonized African. Well, if I'm colonized here, then, and if this is an empire, then this is an imperial process that's colonizing other people. And wait a minute, as I look around, that's exactly what they're saying. The people in Brazil and Cuba and throughout Southern and South America and the continent of Africa and even Europe are all saying we're colonized African diaspora. Or we're a Latin American colonized community, or, depending on how people, there are variations of it. Indigenous populations, the same thing. So then you say, well, then why I have to link up with that? And this goes to the whole thing about the famous question he had with the Algerian revolutionary over Black nationalism and the whole question of the post-Hajj adjustment to not a kumbaya, but to recognize what white and white supremacy means here, or how it functions here versus other parts of the world. And then there are others who would argue, and I probably would be in that camp too, that had Malcolm continued to live, he would have seen more of the contradictions within Arab nationalism and Islam in terms of anti-Blackness and Africanness. So I don't think that's hard to speculate as you look at the trajectory he was on. That's my point. So that's why I'm saying, like, I don't really care what door people come through, if it's the gender door, the sexuality door, the race door, the class door, the ethnic door, the religious door. But once you get in, all of that has to play ultimately, a secondary role to a broader movement and struggle for collectives, for people, for humanity, for land, for so that's why I'm saying, when I say I'm race first, that's just that. It's first in that, and again, I acknowledge where all the potential flaws in that are, even as I see, flaws in abandoning that. But the point for me is to keep you keep going. And I think, in fact, one of the moments I think we're kind of stuck in now, or encouraged to be stuck in, is a sort of reactionary identity politics, where people get sort of stuck at the door that they're coming in through. And they say, and that's the only thing they're worried about. I'm only interested in the gender door, or the class door, or the sexuality door. And it's like, well, I mean, at the end, and that's where you start to even lose people like me. At the end of the day, yes, I want everybody to be equal and be treated, and I want everybody to have room to deal with their particular, space in these struggles. But that is, for all of us, has to be subsumed beneath the broader struggle for land, for freedom, for liberation, for sovereignty, for redistribution, however people want to call it. So anyway, so I just think, that kind of clarity is important. So, but yeah, anyway, that's how I at least think I'm trying to approach it, you know.
I think that's a really great segue, because we do want to talk with you about the notion of fatherhood. I personally love that you address yourself as a father first and a husband versus credentials, and the notion of family in African personality and community is really crucial to the movement as well, and part of that notion of humanism. And you mentioned a lot of these doors, and also we're thinking about the Huey Newton speech in 1970, where he spoke to LGBTQ plus communities, as well as women being part of repressed communities, and challenging the not simply misogyny, but even misogynoir in a lot of revolutionary communities. So with your sort of evolution, if you will, to the identity as a father and husband, like how did that come to be? And with the Huey Newton speech, if you've read it, I take it that you have, like, what, when you first read it, was there a revolution? Did that sort of shift to a particular revelation you had in the shift to this identity?
So first, before I forget, how do I get a sweatshirt like that? I want that cream sweatshirt. Is dope. And it took me, how long we been on the call? Like 17 minutes. Because I was just like, wow, she's, you know, I mean, that's cool. She likes woo. And then I was like, wait a minute, that's not woo. That's not cream get the money. That's capitalism ruins everything around me. And I was like, that's dope. So
I'll let you know.
Yeah, please let me know. I would like to get one. You know, I don't remember the details of the Huey speech. It's been a while, but what I remember is the vibe that I walked away from, which was that it was good. That the first thing I remember, I felt it was good. I had found evidence that would help me defend the Panthers against a lot of the backlash that I felt was coming, and still think is unjust in the critique. And I'm fine if I'm wrong in that, but you know, like I kept feeling like the flaws of the Panthers, and still do to a certain extent. That there's more people are interested in writing about the flaws and the shortcomings, and not understanding or appreciating at least the ideas they were working with in the context. So you know, when I'm, you know, and now as I'm you know, now 49 years old, I'm older. I'm 10 years older than Malcolm when he died. You know, I'm older than all of these cats, and I'm thinking, like, they were in their 20s and they were in their early 30s getting shot at and locked up and hounded by the most powerful state in the history of humanity, with all the resources in the world at their disposal, doing all kinds of shady, underhanded, and we expect a certain level of perfection from them that I just think is unfair. So I remember when I read it, I was like, wow, I mean, that's good. They're dealing with this in ways that they're being accused of not dealing with it by I thought a lot of people in particularly, as I remember, this probably for me in the, I don't know, early to mid 90s when this would have been for me, somewhere around there, I think. And I'm just thinking, all I'm hearing about is that how they were just, you know, I don't know, misogynists and they hate it. And then even more recently, extending from that is some of the more recent and more honest discussion around Kwesi Balagoon and the Black Liberation Army, and people, you know, recognizing that not that it was, I'm not saying that I know everything about it or that it was a perfect life, but that you do have the participation in the most militant wings of our struggle of gay men. So this, which again for me is like, that's like, okay, people with, you know, homosexual people who are homosexuals or have sexuality or gender struggles that they have to work out in terms of who they are and how they're being treated by the society. Not that those are themselves problems to be fixed, but in terms of how society treats or welcomes those people and their, preferences and behaviors is something that needs to be dealt with, and they need room to deal with that, and we all need to evolve, I think, a better way of dealing to it. Presence of all of these different genders and sexual preferences in our communities needs to be dealt with, but there needs to be also room to recognize and encourage their participation in the most militant ends of our struggle. So historically, where we know and are learning more about where LGBTQ people were doing it and have been doing it, today we encourage people who are their own, struggles of identities, they need to be encouraged to work that out and then evolve, as I'm arguing with my race first analysis, into this revolutionary, whatever we want to call it. So that my point is, what I'm remembering and how I remember, and I need to go back and look at it, when I remember reading that speech, is that this is sort of the vibe that I was getting. Like this, okay, great. Now I selfishly have one more sort of a tactic I can use to encourage not only acceptance of whoever, and encourage that whoever get more militant. That, because I don't want to get to the point where we're just saying, I love you and I welcome you and I'm hugging you and it's great that you're here in the community and we're all here and that's great. And then we just stop. That has to be the step that encourages some more radical activity and organization. And that's, so that's, what was the other part of the question? I forgot the other part of the question.
So your evolution as,
the father part, right? Wow. Well, that was simple. It was just once my first daughter was born, the incalculable emotional response. I wasn't ready for it as much as I was present and thought I was. So it just sort of, I don't know, it's just sort of just taking over everything. So and it even challenges me ideologically, because I think all of my isms go out the door when I think about my children. Like, I'm not, I said race first, but when it comes to my children, everybody is equally a problem and a threat. And will get the same response. So, I don't know, but but it has also made me think more and with even a deeper appreciation for some of the people we've already mentioned. Because it has, I think, limited me. And I've tried to be honest with that with people that I've organized with. I have been limited by my fears around, not being here for my daughters, or just selfishly being able to just watch them grow up. So when I think about people who are still locked up, like our political prisoners, that's one of the reasons why I talk about them all the time, because I would hate to think that I would get locked up and couldn't see my children grow up and nobody would be talking about me. So the parent thing is just totally dominated everything. There are people I haven't responded to violently because my children are here, right or wrong. I don't know if that's right or wrong, but that is a fact. Just the fact that my children are here, I've been more peaceful. I've recognized and even read some things about that there's apparently some physiological changes that men go through who have daughters in particular, where we literally lose testosterone as a result of our daughters, not just sons, but daughters being born. So I feel like, quote unquote, softer as I've gotten older, just from that, at least, that's what I feel like, So I try to remember what my political analysis is supposed to be also, because I don't want to lose all of that either, and become useless to a struggle just because I have children. Because again, same thing. Identity, sexual, ethnic, racial, whatever, or even parental can't be, ultimately I should be criticized for this, because, the point can't be to have children and become softer in the struggle. The point should be to somehow encourage them to be stronger in the struggle. And I find that to be, That's very difficult. And that's when, you know, so I, you know, I know I'm not alone in this, and some of my friends even talk about it, but if we look historically at what happens politically with the children of revolutionaries, there is a drop off, so to speak. And I see why. Because, you know, if, you know, even when I take a stance politically, publicly, some of the backlash I get just verbally, like, I'd be like, man, if you talk that way to my children, like, we're gonna have a major problem. So like, I wouldn't want them to be like, so I started to think, but they have to take those positions when they get older. So they'll have to be able to themselves suffer some backlash, you know, and I'll have to, you know, I can't go out here and try to, you know, track down every internet troll and every YouTube comment and every, you know, be like, you said this about my child, now what's up? You know, I can't do that either. So, I mean, you know, but I mean, these are I don't know. I mean, so yeah, you know, when I, you know, it is honest. Like, you know, when I wake up in the morning, the first thing I'm thinking about is how my kids, what's the situation? Are they, you know, everybody tucked in still? What's the situation? And then the next thing is my wife, who, you know, so that's why I'm saying it's not, you know, I've seen people make fun of it too, but it's not just I don't know, it's not just a game or a performance. I mean, that's actually how I see myself. I am a father first, and I am a husband. And then after that, we can talk about all the other professional things. Anyway, so I don't know I hope that answers your question.
Yeah.
You know,
I think it would be interesting to have you on for another episode, and we could get more into the nuances of that, because some of the things you were saying, I instantly thought about toxic males like T.I. who have daughters. So that is a whole other episode. We won't get into that, but I do want to read a little bit of what Huey Newton said, and then I want to pass it off to Jeffrey.
Sure.
So he says, we must gain security in ourselves and therefore have respect and feelings for all oppressed people. We must not use the racist attitude that the white racists use against our people because they are Black and poor. Many times the poorest white person is the most racist because he is afraid that he might lose something or discover something that he does not have. So you're kind of a threat to him. This kind of psychology is in operation when we view oppressed people and we are angry with them because of their particular kind of behavior or their particular kind of deviation from the established norm. Remember, we have not established a revolutionary value system. We are only in the process of establishing it. I do not remember our ever constituting any value that said a revolutionary must say offensive things towards homosexuals, or that a revolutionary should make sure that women do not speak out about their own particular kind of oppression. As a matter of fact, it is just the opposite. We say that we recognize the women's right to be free. We have not said that much about homosexual at all, but we must relate to the homosexual movement because it's a real thing. So I will end there. And so many people that are in the forefront of the struggle are women and non-men and LGBTQ folks, like the front lines of the protests. That is who we are seeing. And so many men take the credit. So it's, to me, excellent, not only as you talked about, sort of a strategy in organizing the masses by doing this is very tactical, but it also leads to something that counters, again, is what you said, what people have said, oh, they don't deal with this head on, but here's someone who is at the forefront of this organization saying, like, we need to view the struggles of all oppressed people. So I definitely appreciate that. And when I read the speech, I was like, yes, you know, it just goes. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
No, and I appreciate that too. And I, you know, and again, I mean, I'm a deeply flawed person, so I have a lot of things to work out on my own as well. But this is again my point, like just what you brilliantly summarized. Whatever issues I have with anybody in my community or in the world are my own, and shouldn't mean that gives me the right to say whatever I want to say. Like people talk about where they're uncomfortable, you know, hearing about homosexuality in their community. I'm uncomfortable when I hear about Christianity in my community, but I can't go around pointing at Christians and being like, you know, let's, you know, kick them to the curb and throw them out of the struggle. And, you know, when they tell me they go home and they read the Bible, I'm like, oh, but okay. That's fine. If your Christianity leads you to Nat Turner or at least Dr. King, cool. So that's my point. So if someone's sexuality path leads them to Kwesi Balagoon, I mean, whatever I might think about it, what their private life is irrelevant. I mean, that's just my own hang up if I have one. And that's really, but this whole thing of I get to, find the people in my community or in the world who are struggling, who do whatever they do that somehow makes me feel a certain way, that I then have a right to lash out and duplicate oppressor relationships to them. It's infuriating, actually.
Yeah, and I think in the same light of the Black Panthers, the Black Panther Party, I kind of was mentioned earlier, they get called misogynistic and engage in all these practices that they weren't doing as part of their program. But, as you stated in, even in this session and even in your various books about how the media reinvents a lot of our radical revolutionaries, I wanted to speak about the upcoming Fred Hampton movie. See if you kind of elaborate on it and the sensationalism around the Black Panthers in general. I really enjoyed the piece that you wrote on your site as well. But if you kind of just elaborate for those who haven't read it and some of your thoughts on that as well.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, these products are a problem for me, and I'm on the record even with some friends of mine who are involved with the film and supporting the film, and I've even talked to Fred Jr. and respectfully, was like, I think this is going to be a problem. What I've tried to develop over the last couple of years is a shout out to an old friend of mine, the Vernon philosophy of Black media avoidance. This idea that really all oppressed groups should avoid trying to find themselves in commercial media imperial products, which is what they are. Even when we like them, these are commercial products. They're often well made. They involve a lot of talented people. In some cases, they're even really good and they're emotional. They pull all the strings and push all the buttons, and they know all the chords to make you feel a certain way. Music. It's great. But it is an imperial commercial product that is playing a function. And we have to recognize that, especially when we're enjoying it. And that's the hardest part, because, So anyway, what I've just been predicting, and I saw in the trailer already, although I know trailers are often not, is that, Fred is going to be reduced, just as you were saying, Jeffrey, in the setup there, that he's going to be reduced to a caricature of what people have been condemning the Panthers to be. He's just going to be yelling in the background, or in the trailer, he's just yelling in the background. There's no discussion of him as a father, as a husband, as a man, as a human being, as a socialist, as a revolutionary nationalist, as, are we going to, so I'm predicting, at least because these products don't often make room for that there's no history of it, at least that I'm aware of, where we're going to see a sustained and honest and creative depiction of the engagement with socialist politics beyond just the rhetoric and the chanting. Why are they involved in armed self-defense? Why, beyond the fact of a shootout on camera, why are they arguing that Black people should have guns? Why would that be relevant in 2021? And not just have guns, but use them in organized, community protective, self-defensive measures. I mean, and why do we have to have the film told through the agent? The story is told through the perspective of the agent. Are we going to get an honest critique of the counterintelligence program, of the FBI, of intelligence agencies? Are we going to, and then what is the point of the film? Why are they making these movies? And I think a lot of it has to do with, they see the uprisings in the streets and they know that there's going to be no actual material response to that improves that. So they'll just give some symbolism and we'll somehow be expected to, find comfort in it and calm down. But it's the same thing that Dhoruba bin Wahad and I think Amiri Baraka both said about the Malcolm X movie when it first came out. That when you read the with all of its flaws, when you read Malcolm's autobiography, you still like you want to do something. It didn't like it is like that document is like there's something in that document with all of its Alex Haley-isms and all of its, you know, whatever isms done to it. You put that book down like, whoo, I'm late to the struggle. Like
that book changed my life. I just had to say that.
Of course. No, of course. It changed everybody's life. That's the point. That's why we attacked Marable's book. Like, why do you need another book? Like, what's wrong? Why do you need to replace the book? Because when you finish 600 pages of Marable, you're not ready to pick up something and get into the streets. You're ready to like, oh, well, damn, I guess, woo, thank God Obama got elected. And you know what I mean? Like that's the response. So the same thing with certainly the same thing with a Fred Hampton. If you walk out of Fred Hampton and are not immediately going to the local chapter of whatever, or starting the local chapter of whatever, or just convening in the lobby of the movie theater or whatever virtual version of that we're doing now, and saying, "What's up?" Like, what are we even doing in a movie theater right now? Like, what are we even doing watching a movie? Because all of the material conditions against which Fred was struggling are worse now. I mean, even before COVID, worse poverty, worse inequality, worse joblessness, more warfare, more police violence, more incarceration, less healthcare, less political organization, less international movements, less media access for even radicals. Because even in Fred Hampton's day, you might see Huey Newton on the local TV news. You might see him on ABC with what's his name? The white Republican conservative, I keep forgetting his name, they used to host them. You don't see anybody like that on TV nowadays and on popular YouTube shows. Even the most popular radical white YouTubers don't talk to black radicals. So, I mean, so there's no point for me to talking about Fred unless we're telling people we need to all become Freds and whoever's and Akuas and whoever's and Asadas and all of them. Like that's, if we're not doing that, like, but that's not what the movie's going to do. And when you're telling it through the lens of an FBI agent or snitch and just horrible human being, I don't want to see this dude humanized. The dude poisoned Fred and helped him get set up by COINTELPRO. I don't want to see him be humanized. And I don't want to see him turned into some sort of understandable / semi-heroic or you know, sympathetic character. And I want to experience Fred's evolution politically. But I don't think we're going to do that. And I don't think we're going to get that. And already, I mean, I don't know what's public about this yet, but there's already all kinds of little beefs about, there's already people who are involved with the filming are not happy with what they're seeing and hearing about the film. So, but then they signed on to do it. I mean, these are wild contradictions. The same thing, by the way, with Mike Africa and the 40 Years a Prisoner documentary on HBO. That doesn't talk about the MOVE bombing in '85, doesn't talk about Mumia at all, who's only depicted because he's in a poster when Pam Africa's on screen. And what I've heard, I don't have the proof for this, is that he was told that HBO was like, we're not talking about Mumia and we're not talking about the MOVE bombing and of '85, and that's it. And understandably, he was like, you know, whatever, I want to get my parents' story told and I want them out. So I'm not blaming him. I'm just saying what these imperial media company products are doing are trying to tell stories in a way that make it look like we're being fed the histories we need and the context we need. But in reality, it's being distilled in a way that's not encouraging us to move, pun intended. So I don't know. I'll stop there.
No, this is definitely what happened with Black Klansman. It lionized an agent. This is what happened with Spike Lee. Spike Lee, once again, with the Malcolm X movie, did not talk about any aspect of Pan-Africanism when it came to Malcolm X. Just anything that is going to sort of separate Africans in the diaspora versus the continent is going to get funded by Hollywood. That's what happened with Black Panther. And I'm just amazed that Boots Riley is somehow getting funding somewhere. That dude's an open communist. Like, how is he getting funding? I have no idea what's going on. I think you're absolutely right. There's going to be a lot of missing pieces, despite, I know Rosa Clemente was involved. I know, again, Fred Hampton Jr. was involved, but, you know, they could be at the consulting table and they're like, okay, thanks for letting us know, and then totally not take.
Look, I told them, look, I love them both. You know, Rosa's my ace, but I said the same thing. You know, and look, first of all, as I always tell her, I may be critical of some of the choices she makes, but they're never available to me. Like, nobody called me and said, do you want to work on this movie? So it's easy for me to sit here and be like, nah, don't do that. Don't do that. But if Ryan Coogler and Fred Jr. said, Jared, we want you to be involved, I'd like to think I would say no, but I don't know. Honestly, I don't know that I could do that. So I want to be fair. Like, it's important. I think my analysis is correct, but I'm not saying I'm above the you know, I've never been invited to be on somebody's red carpet. So I don't know. I don't know. But I did say that your involvement gives them cover, because now when the movie comes out and it's the garbage that I know it's going to be, they'll be able to say, well, Fred Jr. was on it, Akua and Jerry was on it, the you know, Fred's widow was on it, Rosa was on it. You know, they all got checks, they all got their name up on the board, they all got, you know, so what's the issue? Like, we can only make a movie, we can't make the perfect movie, so we did the best we could, and they're going to use that for cover. But there's no way in hell. Look, you know, there's too much history and evidence in terms of what is done. They don't have final edit or final cut or whatever. So you can consult all day. You could be on the shoot. You could be in the scene. You could write the scene. You could act in the scene. You could run the cameras in the scene. But if you're not in that room, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter, and all that work will end up on the floor or in the digital trash can, and so what? Because the product that comes out has to be sold to the target audience, which is always white people with money. So how much blackness and black radicalism are white people with money are actually going to suffer through? And if you want white people with money to buy it, they got to see, you know, you got to, you know, calm down the socialism, calm down the logical black radicalism. You know, we need our Negroes screaming and yelling and all of that stuff, because that way, if you scream socialism on a microphone, it's easier for people to say, oh, that's crazy. But if you lay out why you've done that, or the analysis you've evolved before you picked up the microphone, then the person watching it might be like, oh, well, dang, that makes sense. Especially now, with Bezos making $2,800 a second, somebody might say, well, damn, that Fred Hampton analysis sounds even better right now. But if you couch it like this, and then of course you end up with him getting shot and killed and set up with and have it be blamed mostly on a black agent, then you could just, then white audience members can say, oh, well, you know, just like with Malcolm, oh, you know, it's some other crazy Negroes that killed him and set him up. Or a few bad apple cops, you know, but so we'll defund the police, or we'll call for defund the police in 2021, and we'll feel better.
Yeah, that's a great segue into the next question. Actually, you know, and it ties into what you talked about in regards to community defense and the Black Panther Party. You know, due to the recent killings of various Africans like George Floyd, and, you know, you have the killings of Tamir Rice, Breonna Taylor, and others. You know, there's been a lot of conversation, as you stated, you know, centered around defunding the police, and you have other people, you know, a lot of ideological struggles in general, defunding the police, abolishing the police versus reforming the police. Just kind of give us your take on that and just your thoughts.
Well, I got to give a plug here because and people, I would encourage them to go to imixwhatilike.org and watch the interview that I did with Lawrence Grand Prix of the Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle in Baltimore. I won't do it justice here, but his analysis to me of that is the best, which is simply that defund the police has become, you know, a phony symbolic slogan that nonprofits can use to raise money, but that actually they can't implement, primarily because defunding the police is a local, state, municipal issue. It's not a federal issue. And yet nonprofits are using the slogan to fundraise nationally. So they just say vaguely and, you know, emptily defund the police. And you could say things like use the money to redistribute to social workers and other things like that, but you can't actually advocate a policy process that will lead to that conclusion because it's not a federal issue. And of course, nonprofits can't openly advocate for one politician or political party over another. So that's one issue. The other issue is that, as Lawrence points out, because so many of these nonprofit ideas and slogans are being evolved outside of real connections to Black communities in the streets, a lot of these Black communities, the so-called grassroots, are saying, we don't necessarily want the police to be defunded and replaced until you have a solution that's going to protect us. So it's one thing, and you know, and I remember one of the first things that I came up with many, many years ago as a quote unquote grassroots activist was that I wanted to legalize, and I still do think all drugs should be legal. Tax them, legalize them, regulate them, and use the revenue to develop other social safety nets, other programs, et cetera. And you get rid of all the violence, you get rid of all a lot of the abuse, at least, and so on and so on. But my logic doesn't work in many of the communities where I wanted to organize. A lot of Black grassroots communities, Latin American, brown communities as well, they don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear that. Legalize drugs. Drugs just killed my whole family. Drugs got my whole family caught up on this, and even when I would say, but none of that would happen under my version of legalization. Like there wouldn't be getting locked up and there wouldn't be gangs running the drug trade and all that. It doesn't matter. So in other words, I needed to develop, or my organization needed to develop another approach that was based in and born out of the needs of and the perspectives of those communities, or our communities, even where they differed from our own. Because coming in with that kind of top-down, just sort of broad fantasy doesn't necessarily work, at least in the mind's eye of people that you want to build with. So you know, that's one. Again, Lawrence does a much better job of explaining this and really breaks stuff down better than I'm doing. But that's the short version of what I think of that. And then ultimately, as well, if these slogans and campaigns are not connected immediately to both grassroots political organization, but also the development of alternative methods for engaging the electoral political process, it's useless. So in other words, if people committed to working within the Democratic Party are not developing blocks and candidates and campaigns, it's useless. If people who don't want to work within the Democratic Party, like me, don't develop those same kind of entities outside of that party, then the slogans are useless, because ultimately all of this is public policy. The marching and the pressure is good, but you, at the end of the day, have to have campaigns and electoral blocks and pressure points to put on that process to make what happens in the street be translated into actual policy. And I don't see that happening either. So it just becomes a lot of sloganeering that ultimately is used to just simply bring mostly Black and brown people back to the Democratic Party. Because if you don't have a specific plan or other alternative, that's where people go with the vote. And then they end up voting for people who don't give a damn about that. and who run for president and get elected while telling you, I'm not only am I not defunding the police, I'm gonna give them Bama's $300 million more dollars. So
And brand new Teslas.
And so that's how, you know, like that's where the hustle comes in for me. And I'm saying, so defund the police. You don't really mean to defund the police. You just heard somebody say that, and it sounds safer than abolish the police. So, you know, I don't know.
Absolutely. And with that, speaking of Democratic Party, 2008, you ran against Obama.
Yeah, it was good timing, right?
And the one thing I have seen, and I never understood it on an intrinsic level, when people had these T-shirts and whatever paraphernalia, is a triumvirate of Obama, Malcolm X, and MLK. I'm sure you're seeing it. So with this reasoning that somehow Obama is, even though he's genetically like continental African, because I know people are like, well, I wasn't born in Africa, whatever, but somehow this person who has roots in continental Africa is accepted as an American based on his actions in the Senate, etc., and especially with the first term. And somehow people equate Malcolm X, as we already talked about, people only have a cursory understanding of Malcolm X or haven't even read anything to get this understanding and sort of this comparison with Obama. First of all, Malcolm X did not identify as American, which we talked about, did not support American US policy or anything having to do with an American ideology. So to connect that, and also the internationalism of MLK, it just doesn't sit well with me. It never has. When you had conversations with folks, when you were running as part of the Green Party, in this conversation, when people talked about Obama to you, what was your experience around that?
It was terrible, man. I mean, it was, so first I just want to be clear, a couple of things. One, I ran for the Green Party nomination in 2007 and 2008 and stepped back to support the eventual nominees of Cynthia McKinney and Rosa Clemente. And I think that was the right choice. And had we elected them, the world would be a better place. And that deserves a whole other discussion. What happened with that whole run was crazy. But what I noticed was that it is very difficult to, first of all, you don't really learn how the system works until you try to change it. And so it was a lesson, even, beyond the theory or what I thought I understood, it was a fascinating process, and I'm glad I did it. But, so the first thing that I learned was or witnessed firsthand was the effect of propaganda. And, it is fitting that Advertising Age selected the Obama campaign for brand of the year in 2008. He was literally picked as, he was marketed outpacing Nike and Apple, his two closest competitors that year. Part of the strategy that I remember Rahm Emanuel, who was then his chief of staff, laid out as part of their communication strategy was to put Obama everywhere, have him constantly talking, posters, images, sounds, so that you could never, they said, so that the audience could never keep up with what he said. And by the time you criticized one point, he had already made 20 more. And then the ubiquitousness of his image just made it seem like it was inevitable. And, people didn't listen to what he was saying. They misinterpreted intentionally what he was, would signal things. And I noticed one thing I noticed a lot, and I don't remember anywhere, I should have written it up because I don't remember reading this anywhere else this way. So maybe it was and I just didn't see it. But he had really mastered making allusions to Black history without actually referencing the people or the movements. So he would make reference to the dream deferred without reference to Langston Hughes or to the explosion part of the poem, he would allude to something akin to Dr. King without talking about Dr. King, or, you know, so it was like these allusions. And I don't know, it was a remarkable thing to witness as people's logic was just shut off. And the machinery of the messaging just took over. And even nominally radical spaces. I mean, again, at mixwhatilike.org, we still have all of those great debates, the great Harlem debates, where particularly if you're my age, you know, like all of the 20th century luminaries of Africana Studies are on mic, recorded in posterity, many of them wrong as hell. I mean, it was, for me, a really disappointing moment to see all these pro-Obama. And I remember in the moment saying, man, I'm getting all this on tape. All of you gonna look bad forever. And to me, they do. You know, I mean, it's remarkable. So, but what it again, it just was another lesson in how disorganized we are, how much work we have to do, because this should have never happened. And in all due respect to the late great Bruce Dixon of Black Agenda Report, who was schooling me to Obama from day one, because he had known him from back in the Chicago days. So in some ways I was, you know, set up to see things that other people weren't going to see, just because of my relationship with the early days of Black Agenda Report and Bruce Dixon, and just having people around me encouraging me to pay more attention from back in 2004, you know, when he first started making it onto the scene. And it's just like, wait, this guy. And at the Democratic National Convention where he did that, there's no Black America, white America, Latin America, it's just America. I emailed my buddy and was like, this dude is dangerous. And sure enough, you know, and and as a radical Pan-Africanist, I don't want to, I don't want my radical Pan-Africanism to shut down my logic in recognizing that, again, you know, with Kamala Harris and Barack Obama, there is a distinct disconnect from the African experience in this country with this ascendancy. And I do remember when Eleanor Cliff said on the old show, the McLaughlin Group, about Obama, that she was basically saying to white people, it's safe to vote for him because he does not have the baggage of slavery. So there is an anti-Pan-African politics working here that's playing on our Pan-Africanists or Pan-Africanism, that says we can find anybody from the diaspora as long as they have any a connection to the diaspora and a bunch of horrible politics, we can pass them off as Black. And Black people will be encouraged to support them as their own. And whether I may, you know, as a Pan-Africanist, they are, but I'm not getting run over by the hustle either, that there is among white people in this country. I think what Eleanor tapped into was that a very real feeling that Black Americans scare us unlike Africans of the diaspora. And if we can find a way to play off of that, we should do it. And if we can get Black Americans to feel like their struggle has been won by appointing people from the diaspora with really bad politics, then so be it. Like, they didn't grab a Kwame Ture. They didn't, you know what I mean? They didn't grab, you know what I mean? They didn't grab even people today like Kambali Musavuli. They're not grabbing radicals now from the diaspora. Like, I'm cool with that. You want to make Kambali president? I'm good with that. I'm good with that. And then you can walk all over my Black Americanness all day long and I'll be fine with that. But they don't want to, but I see what the hustle is. I see the game that they're playing here. And the whole mix thing too. Which well, maybe not obviously, but I obviously have been dealing with, you know, people hustling with that, you know, trying to run a hustle with me on that from day one. And me resisting it and seeing that people like Obama are not resisting it. So when he says in Dreams of My Father that he stopped telling white people that his mother was white because he felt it falsely ingratiated himself with them, he was telling people like me that he knows the racial hustle as well as anybody and he's going to run it. So if not being seen as mixed to white people will work for him in certain situations, he understands that when white people know his mother's white, he gets falsely welcomed, then he knows that the reverse is also true, that he can play up his blackness to con black people. So when I read that, that's how I read that. And then it played out in his politics, and it played out in his policy very clearly. When he says in his most recent book, when it said of him, at least in the most recent book by David Garrow, that he was very clear that he had to get rid of his Asian girlfriend who he loved more, and had to pick Michelle because he needed that Black American woman if his career was going to be successful. I mean, I knew that. I felt that. I felt that. So my point is, people are playing these. People are hustling and attempting to play our politics against us, and we just have to be more vigilant. And I think I veered off where your initial question went, but I think that, but that would be where I would want to end this rant. That we have to be very vigilant about what our politics are, and even going back to that previous question. When the establishment is looking to impose upon us either a movie or a candidate, we should become very skeptical and become very, and really dig back into our political bag, our ideological bag, and get clarity, you know.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we do have some questions about the book on Malcolm X. Because I know that is just, again, having a cursory look at what Malcolm X wrote, there's a lot of misinterpretation, again, equating him with Obama. I've heard people even argue with me that he's in favor of capitalism, when that's very clearly not the case. So so that's my part of the question. Jeffrey will ask another one. But where do you think, based on people saying, I read Malcolm X, where do you think these misinterpretations stem from, despite him publicly being the exact opposite?
Well, first, they're not being honest, because you can't read Malcolm. You can't listen to him on YouTube. You can't watch him you can't engage Malcolm in any media platform, in any medium, and think that he supports capitalism. You would have to, you have to be willful. You have to avoid the documented historical record. You could say you disagree with his analysis and critique of capitalism. You could be mistaken there too, but that's fine. But you could do that, but that's at least more honest than saying he just wasn't. So they're not reading, they're not listening, they're not paying enough attention. So that would start with that. And then the rest of it is that there has been a 50-year long process of posthumously rebranding Malcolm, because he is, to use the language somewhere else, too big to fail. Like, Malcolm can't be erased. So there has to be, and when my generation started to repopularize him through hip hop, there was another backlash from the state that said, if they're going to pick up Malcolm, we have to give them a version of Malcolm to pick up, which is why when Spike's movie was coming out, Warner Brothers said they wanted to turn Malcolm X into a brand, just like Batman and The Simpsons. Again, if you're going, what is a successful commercial brand? Something that affluent white people in this country buy repeatedly. So if you're going to turn Malcolm X into Batman or The Simpsons, what does he have to do? Well, that's why you get, and people can check me on this too, you get 90 minutes of a film on Malcolm that is focused on everything that had nothing to do with what the man was that made him the revolutionary hero to the world that he was. So we get 90 minutes of the white girl foot licking and the drugs and the dancing and the prison and the burglaries, and 90 minutes. You got one film and you're going to make 90 minutes on that, and then you're going to give us less than that amount of time on the Malcolm that became the international superhero to the world, the radical threat to every major government in the Western world, the one that inspired every radical movement that came after him, the one that, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm getting amped. I'm getting like right now, I'm ready to like throw the mic away. Like, let's go. Like, what are we doing?
And how
but
can
you put it,
well, how
anyway.
can you have a movie that doesn't include Ella? Like, I'm like, how can, like, she wasn't even a thought in the movie. And when they had him go to Hud, he went to Mecca, he was bumbling. It was just like he had an analysis that wasn't even a thought. And Ella, I was like, throw this movie away.
I mean, imagine starting a movie about Malcolm X in the car on the Jersey Turnpike with Asada, Zaid Shakur, talking about Malcolm in the context of the Panther Party as they're about to get pulled over and into a gun battle with the New Jersey State Troopers. That's just one, and I'm not even an imaginative creative guy. Like, that's just one way you could start a movie about Malcolm X right there. The point being, all of the radical revolutionaries that put terror in the hearts of this country's state apparatus directly connect themselves to Malcolm X. All of them. Everybody claims him. The cultural nationalists, the revolutionary nationalists, the socialists, the communists, the anarchists, every single body, the Democrats, the Republicans, everybody is claiming Malcolm. And yet you want to give us 90 minutes because they have to turn him in, because of course, white people with money don't want to be reminded of Asada and Zaid and Sundiata. They don't want that. They want a Marable Viking press book that tells you that Malcolm would have been supporting Obama as he bombs the Muslim Brotherhood and bombs Libya and bombs, I can't remember, he started 5 wars, Obama did. So, you know, I mean, the only thing I can say is that we have to be appreciative of the tremendous amount of effort and propaganda that those in power have consciously sought to create in this country and world around not only people like Malcolm, but the ideas that they represented. So there have to be aggressive and persistent measures taken to make sure that when people who, you know, from the perspective of power, you know, you're going to keep oppressing people. The Air Force was doing war games in 2018 in preparation for a Generation Z rebellion that they called the Z-bellion, because across racial lines, they were saying all the studies show oppression's going to get worse and equality. This is before COVID. Everything's going to get worse. And all these kids are going to grow up and they're going to want a revolution. So instead of redistributing and fixing the material conditions of those people in the country, you just get your military together and train them to go to war. So intellectually, the same thing is going on. The same processes are involved. Well, what is done to prepare for war? It's not simply a physical military process. It's a psychological process. You have to start recharacterizing the enemy as less than human, as deserving of the weaponry, of the violence. So how do you do that? One method, one of the many methods, is to depict the most radical representatives of those groups as immature, as lunatics, as, you know, inappropriate. And then when you see them get shot up and imprisoned and exiled and hunted, you'll be like, well, that's cool, because I wasn't going to do that anyway. So I wouldn't have to worry about that happening to me. And, you know, and if they had just put on a suit and voted, they could have gotten everything that they wanted done, you know, whatever. I mean, that's sort of the, and then lastly, the counterintelligence program statements are very clear. We must make sure Black youth don't become radicals. So, and Malcolm was a threat that they targeted specifically. So the idea that again, that we're going to get a movie or a TV show or a Netflix series that is going to correctly lay out these people and their histories and then inspire us to follow them. That's not logical. Even if we're not a militant revolutionary, that's just not logical to expect that. So we have to, I think, become much more critical of it and suspicious of it, and stop looking for these small symbolic, I saw myself on TV, I saw someone tell my story in a movie. No, you didn't. You saw somebody rewrite that nonsense so that some white kid with money and his or her parents will feel good about taking them to see the movie. So if you need to see your story told so that white people with money will feel better hearing it, then it's not your story anymore. Because I know if even if my story got told right, white people would be terrified. So, and I'm just Jared Ball. I know white people with money in particular would be just literally shaking in their boots, running to their basements, getting their guns, just off of my story. If you told my story accurately, that I'm serious, they would literally be in the basement, locking up, calling their whoever. So Malcolm, sure. Fred Hampton, oh my God. I mean, Asada, I mean, George Jackson, you can't tell these stories. Not really. You can't even tell the average story of Black life in this country. Look at what's happening now with like Lovecraft Country. To your point about Boots, and I said that my one-liner is that sorry to bother you is to class what Get Out is to race. But look at these crazy sci-fi horror comedies that you have to make just to tell a little bit of the truth. Like you have to do all this, like white people with money are not, they need to be like, if they're saying, like, if you're going to, like, they're saying, look, if you're going to tell me stories about Black history, you better put aliens in it. You better have people shape shifting and race shifting and gender shifting. And you better have, like, you know what I mean? Like, it better not resemble too much of this world where Black people really suffered this and are really still suffering this, because then they'll turn it off. They're not going to watch that.
Yeah. And I feel like, you did a great job in your book, kind of talking about how the system reinvented, or what the necessity for the system to reinvent Malcolm X's image. And just to point out a quote, I know it stated, the continuity of oppression from Malcolm's time to now requires both the physical assassination of the man and the subsequent reassassination of his ideas. In truth, those assassinations are what make today's inequality possible. And I think that can be said for so many other revolutionaries, including Malcolm as well. But also one point I wanted to get to as well is, or kind of discuss further, is, as you alluded in the Lie of Reinvention, is how, these, Manny Marable's book and others, like it, that kind of tailor their messaging to be more liberal, I would say, is bigged up by the media and the capitalist system, like New York Times, the petty bourgeoisie, like Henry Skip Louis Gates, Michael Eric Dyson and the Democratic Party. So if you kind of just talk about the dangers of that and how that propaganda seeps through to colonize people to pick up those messages.
And I won't get the quote right, but in her book, The Cultural Cold War, which is really it's sometimes actually my favorite book in the world. I mean, this book is so dope. What Frances Stoner Saunders points out, she quotes this guy who was part of the apparatus that was developed during the Cold War, this U.S. and British alliance of secret intelligence agency apparatus to set up a cultural world of arts and letters, as she points out, where, and the quote, this guy who was in charge of one of these popular magazines that performed this work in the world, was that he said something like, you don't have to find people who you tell to say this and say that. That's not how it works. You set up the criteria and people will aspire to it. So this, and it is beautiful. I mean, I hate the system, but it is beautiful. You don't tell Jared, you have to say this or you say that. You don't do that. You just show us. Look, man, Dyson told, I can't prove this, but in my years of backs and forths beefing with this guy, he told a friend of mine, a mutual friend of ours, actually, he said once that I don't know why Jared is mad at me, because I'm just trying to show him not to become this marginalized nationalist at an HBCU. Now, even if you thought in our argument that Dyson was right and I was wrong argumentatively, what Dyson said there, which I know he did say to my friend, I just can't prove it. It was, it wasn't on the record. But what he said there to me, and the reason I don't mind sharing it is because it's so revealing about, not just about him, but about the apparatus itself, that I don't think anybody has gone to Dyson and said, write these whack books and take these whack political positions and get your grad students to write your books for you and then put your name on it and support Hillary Clinton and then spend 10,000 words attacking Cornel West, not a white supremacist, not a Republican, not a conservative, not even like a centrist liberal, but Cornel West, like he's the boogeyman now. Like of all, you got 10,000 words in the New Republic, getting paid by the word. And you have to use that space against West? Now, again, West is soft to me too, but that's who you target for 10,000 words? So, but anyway, but what he's revealing in that is that there is a danger. There is a system of rewards where you get invited and paid by the word to write 10,000 words for a magazine, and prominently displayed and paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to maybe teach one class. Like there are rewards and there are punishments where you get paid very little money relative to academia. There is a punishment. But when you acknowledge that what you're doing is trying to position yourself to not end up there, then you're acknowledging that you're presenting your argument in a way that's going to get, again, simply put, white people with money to find it acceptable. And even if I was skillful enough to do that, even if I wanted to try to do that, look, the Myth of Buying Power book is the softest book, the softest political argument I've ever made publicly. It is I struggled to keep it from I didn't want my politics to be in the book as much as possible. That's not really possible, but I didn't want people to be distracted by, well, he's a radical, so I wanted them just to focus on the myth. But that was so hard to do. And even then, I still end up taking positions that are unwelcomed by those in power. So it's but anyway, so what she's pointing to is that they just set a set of criteria. And if you want to be on MSNBC and if you want the hundreds of thousands of dollars, and if you want, Glenn Greenwald said when he left The Intercept this year, he said The Intercept was paying him over $500,000 a year and paying for his personal private security in Brazil. And and his legal team to fight against the struggles he has against the state in Brazil. I'm like, damn, who has that? Anyway, so and Glenn, I think, does actually some pretty good work journalistically, but that's a rare. But anyway, my point is he had to give that up when he had to, when The Intercept was censoring him, he gave that up. And he had to make the conscious decision to say, look, I can't stay here. I could stay here and keep all of this and let them censor me. So my point is people are making on some level a decision because they know that these are the fruits that they want. And I get it. The older I get, I get it. It's harder to not have those fruits when you get older, and you have going back to the other part where you have kids and you're like, I want them to have I want them to have everything and whatever. But I don't know. Again, I think I've lost the initial question, but somewhere in there is I don't know. We're all invited to take certain positions so that that we don't upset the flow.
Yeah, no, I think you did a great job of answering that. I definitely agree with all the positions you take, and those shots fired at Dyson. That was that was good.
Look, we have to not that he was hear this or care, but I've said all this to his face. I've said all this to him. He doesn't care. And in the last debate that we had that never aired, I mean, he beat me. I mean, he outdueled me. Not that he was right. He just performed better. So he's all right. He can handle it. He's good. I mean, plus he knows I'm right and that I'm telling the truth. He won't, so I mean, there's nothing that I'm saying that in here that's factually incorrect, even if I can't, fully demonstrate every single, bit of evidence or have every bit of evidence in front of me. I mean, it's, and he's heard worse from way more prominent thinkers than me. So, way more prominent people than me. So he'll be all right. Mm-hmm.
It's funny because there's this theme you're talking about with white people with money, and I keep thinking about Jimmy Dore because I know that you like Jimmy Dore.
I do.
My thing with that sort of comedy, aside from sort of ignoring the masses of African people, but with see, I can't remember half the people's names right now, but all those types of Jon Stewart, I feel like, is the godfather of a lot of that, where people look at it as actual news. But the issue I have with it, and you do not see this with African content creators, a lot of European content creators use comedy as a means to drive the narrative. So I would say even George Carlin, I would say, like, I wouldn't think of him as a comedian per se, but I feel like he did use comedy to drive the narrative. And he wasn't necessarily solutions oriented, but he said society has a problem. There's an issue with patriarchy. There's an issue with all these things. And he actually interviewed with Larry King. He talked about, he was a proponent of free speech. However, the type of comedy or commentary that he chooses to do does not decide to punch down. But anyone who is inspired by him tends to punch down. And so then you have that wave, and then I feel like Dave Chappelle is sort of part of that wave now. And he doesn't necessarily do social commentary, but he targets marginalized communities. But then you have this other end, like John Oliver, that's what I was thinking of. So folks like John Oliver or Jon Stewart, or what's the African dude?
Oh, Trevor Noah.
Trevor Noah. So that type of comedy talks about sort of these societal issues like racism or sexism, but they do it in a way to soften the blow about the systems which inherently protect those things. And so there's no real critique of capitalism, obviously for a reason, but I feel like because they're not affected by these things and are either protected by patriarchy or white supremacy or something on some level, they do know these things are bad, but because they're not necessarily affected by it, they can use comedy as a vehicle. And so what you're saying is that, like, you need to water things down so white people with money will be able to either resonate or support it. And I look at that type of comedy in that way, because even if you look at a lot of the, what they call it, breadtube, or a lot of the left-leaning content creators, a lot of the European content creators use comedy and they use skits. But when we're doing it, just like straight up, here's the problem. So I am wondering what your thoughts are on that, because I see it, I think there's space for that, but when that's all you do, and then you're not even aware that there's African folks on the left, and you're only speaking to people like you who may benefit from that privilege. And so now, of course, when everyone's like BLM and George Floyd, so now everyone's like, oh wait, I've been ignoring like these marginalized communities. So I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that. Do you think that using comedy as a vehicle to talk about these issues, is that an effective way to spread a message? Or do you think that's just a crutch people use?
I love the question. That's so first I would want to say that I think George Carlin was a comedian. I think that brilliant. What I think actually separates even Jimmy Dore from all the names you mentioned, including Carlin, is Jimmy's aggressive and overt stance against the Democratic Party and for an alternative developed party. Like Carlin would make jokes about the two parties, but I don't remember him actually advocating a break with either party. You know, Trevor, who I have written about because I think he plays a very slick, hustling, mixed race, colored, African, Black game that is really disturbing. And his whole presence to me is a problem. But what in this case, what separates Jimmy from them is that Trevor, even Chappelle, who I think is a much funnier comic, and I've actually gone and watched some of Jimmy's stand-up, so I'm not, no disrespect, I just think Dave's a funnier comic. But politically, none of them will go where Jimmy Dore has gone. Now, there are, I think, a couple of reasons. I've been trying to think about this, a lot lately. Already a relatively somewhat successful commercial career is positioned where he has a certain amount of privilege and access to an affluent white audience that will fund him to the point where he can be autonomous and independent. Chappelle could probably do that now. Like if he set up a YouTube show and started railing on the Democrats and did everything Jimmy's doing, Chappelle could probably pull that off. But he might be the only Black comic that could do it. Not just in terms of capability, but that would have enough of what you would need in terms of a white audience to fund you to stay independent and autonomous. I don't think a lot of Black comedians, I don't think a lot of Black people, period, can have access to white audiences or enough of even a Black audience that doesn't have the kind of money the white audiences have to develop enough financial autonomy to take these kinds of positions. I mean, Jimmy actively says, I'm not ever looking to get another job. I don't want an MSNBC job. I already had my Comedy Central special. I'm not trying to get a job in Hollywood. So I'm going to say what these other people can't say. That's what made me keep watching. Because when I'm looking for a media outlet to get news, like I just want the standard American news. Like if I just want that, I'm so desiring to get rid of MSNBC and CNN and so many of even the white left alternatives, which aren't really alternatives. And when I want to find news that's going to ultimately conclude that we can't just vote for a Democrat, there aren't actually that many options, white or Black, that do regular news about, politics and news of the day that ultimately conclude we don't vote for Democrats. So Jimmy's one of the few that I found that did that. So that's one thing that I appreciate about him and that I think separates him from all these others. The main flaw that you point out is that, and they don't have connections to Black communities, Black grassroots organizers. So when Jim Moore wants to do his Black thing, he'll make reference to Dr. King and he'll get Cornel West, because Cornel West is everywhere. Cornel West is supporting the Greens. He's supporting the People's Movement Party. He's supporting Biden. He's seen like everybody. And by the way, nobody reads his work. Like nobody, by the way, it's the same thing with Dyson. Like one of the problems that I ran into was that I'm sitting down, like I'm reading these people's work and this is why I hate them. Not West, but this is why I don't hate, this is why I hate on them. But the people that like and defend them are responding to a speech they saw on TV. So you like Dyson because you saw him on MSNBC, or you like West because you saw him on your favorite podcast. You just know him because he's, in the case of a Jimmy Dore, he's the one Black scholar you've ever heard of, but you still haven't read. Like so you'll grab him. And I get it. I mean, it's a little frustrating, but I don't go to Jimmy Dore for my Black analysis or my Black world Pan-African analysis. I go to Jimmy because most of my Pan-African radicals don't really do regular news commentary about the news of the day. They're having conversations like we're having, or about books or theories or something equally interesting or more interesting. But if I just need some news, and I don't want to sit through another hour of CNN. I don't want to sit through another hour of MSNBC. So Jimmy comes along, and I'm like, he's making me laugh. He's giving me the news, and he's telling me I'm not voting for any of these people, and I want to build another. A Pan-African Black version. That's my show. Like, I tried to watch Ben Dixon's show. Great show that he has on in the morning, but all they want us to do is vote for the Democratic Party. They all work for the Democratic Party. So at the end of the day, I can't be as inspired by that, and I don't find them to be as compelling politically, even if I do culturally, because I feel like I'm in the barbershop. But the problem with when I used to go to the barbershop, but the problem with going to the barbershop a lot of the times was, I might have fun, but they weren't radicals. They might call somebody a cracker or talk about shooting something, or something might come up, but they're not political radicals. So, it's cool. And that's how I feel about a lot of these Black outlets and some of these other alternatives. Like, so that, anyway, but I think ultimately Jimmy is in a rare position. He's a white man who has already had some commercial success. He's at a certain age where, as I get into that age range, I mean, I get one of the few privileges of getting older is you start to, it is real, it's cliche, but you start to get a little bit, get something right, because I need something for myself or my family, or I want to leave the world better than I inherited it. So anyway, that's.
But would you say that Jimmy Dore has committed class suicide?
No, because that's sort of the point I'm getting at. Like, he has that, it's a rare lane. He's making money. The more I learn about YouTube monetization and look at the views he gets, and thousands of just watching him live. Now, ultimately, so he's making good money. And he's got a white audience that in numbers is bigger. And then he's got a white audience that in financial numbers is bigger. So he's got more people who can contribute, more people who will watch it. He taps into a mainstream politics that is going to get more people interested. He's not talking about socialism, and he's not talking about the fifth common turn, and he's not doing all of that. He's talking, and then he's funny. When he honestly, forgive my language, but when he called Aaron Mate a cuck on his show, I was like, I'm gonna be your fan forever, and in part because he's cussing at a friend of his because he told, and Aaron, I'm gonna interview Aaron next week, and I'm probably gonna ask him about this too. But he said, Aaron, you're gonna support Biden after all of this? Like, how? That's the other thing, by the way. Culturally, I don't think Black people, comedians or not, will do what he would do. Black people don't go at each other like this. Like, and I respect that. Like, I can't imagine another Black, I can't imagine two Black comics having a conversation where they get kind of amped and serious and somebody calls somebody the equivalent in Black America of a cuck. I don't know what that would be linguistically, but I just don't see that. And I don't see, like Jimmy's in that rare space. He's saying, I believe him when he says, I'm not trying to make any more friends and I don't need another job. And I don't know too many Black people that can say that, or who would perform on that basis. Like even people I vigorously disagree with. I'm not going to get on some TV thing and cuss at them, and I'm not going to call them names, and I'm not going to, I just wouldn't do that. So I don't know. Anyway, I don't know, but I've been looking. I would love to find a Black equivalent to Jimmy Dore that I could watch on a regular basis.
Maybe that's Dr. Hate.
Because I think it's a white man, particular career and a certain age, and he's hit a. I'm sorry, what'd you say? What was that?
I said maybe it's just the Dr. Hate show.
I mean, the Hate Awards are coming. We just set the date, the 15th, by the way, January 15th, 10 a.m. Eastern. So we'll see what comes of that. But You know, I might have to let Dr. Haight speak for me, but yeah. But I do wish I would want more of our communities to watch Jimmy Dore, not because I think, you know, for whatever I might enjoy stylistically or not, but because of the content and the arguments that he's making and the way that he approaches sort of standard American, you know, I've said he's replaced CNN and MSNBC. I don't watch them anymore. So he's not, you know, anyway, he's not going to drive my militant analysis or organizational work, but I think, you know, the lane he's in is he's playing it right. Or, you know.
I think to your point, like it's not necessarily my cup of tea, but I think in terms of building an analysis, you do need to look at various sides. And so that's the whole mode of dialectics, looking at opposite positions to come to a conclusion. So if Jimmy Dore, say he doesn't have a Pan-African analysis or even an anti-colonial or imperialist analysis, but you know, he's looking primarily at the US and US policy. So what is he saying? And then you can talk to Daruba bin Wahad, for instance. So I think getting all of those sides and then coming to a narrative. And again, you know, getting back to Malcolm X, saying the same thing. It's like you come to a conclusion when you read everything, study everything, so you have a basic understanding of everything. And then you are able to principally take sides. So I see where you're going with that.
Yeah, again, you know, Jimmy is not, I'm not getting my analysis of the world from him. I'm getting specific news. Like if I want to know what Congress is doing or what so-and-so is doing. And then sometimes it's fun when I watch him screaming on these Democrats. Like stylistically, I can appreciate some of it. That, you know, the you know, that old white boy college or high school humor, you know, some of it does appeal to me. I get it. So I get that stylistically, you know, it's not for everybody, but I also like the way he's causing the left to sort of collapse on itself right now. So I like the impact he's having. So just even as a spectator, having some fun, it's great. Yeah.
So with that, to that point, we want to address Bill Clinton attacking Kwame Ture. Let's get a little bit into that, because sort of this contrast between Kwame Ture and I felt was disrespectful. He just kept calling him Stokely. And so even with the Peniel Joseph, it's just like Stokely, a life. It's like, no, there was an evolution in his political analysis. So why are you disrespecting him on that level? And we all know why Clinton did it. But to have and I'm totally going to mangle this quote, but John Lewis talking about, you know, that sort of like creating a scene and making whatever. I'm sure you know the quote I'm talking about. What was it?
I mean, he just said something like, you know, we thought for a minute the movement was going to get away from us, and then John Lewis saved it. You know, we thought it was going to go the way of Stokely, you know, but John Lewis saved it.
But the John Lewis quote saying something, it's get into good trouble. Is that?
Oh, right. His whole thing about, yeah, he wants to be right. Something like, yeah, what was the line? Something about good trouble or be
good trouble. And so you think about that, and while he's saying that, obviously we know the route that he turned to is like pro-APOC, and you know, so he was definitely went towards a neoliberal turn, but everyone's just like, but he was over the bridge. And so everyone sort of idealizes this one moment for John Lewis. And as you're saying, people do not study his politics. And so when Bill Clinton made that comment, I did not see the majority of people call him out for that. This dude whose policies, just like Biden, has been severely white supremacist, the welfare to work program, even the 1996 telecommunications bill, the omnibus crime bill of 95, just all of these things which were rooted in white supremacy and class war, for him to just go and say this at John Lewis's funeral, homegoing, whatever you want to call it, and the majority of people just going, okay, like what? Like, how can you just, even if you just had a race first analysis for this dude to go and say that, it just was interesting that it wasn't highly questioned by folks who are race first, and that the only people who are questioning it understand the politics, the analysis of Kwame Ture. And again, going back to this, I love how you use the white people with money thing, because that's what it's appealing to, and getting to the pro-imperialist, pro-Zionist analysis and politics of John Lewis, and then just sort of encapsulating it with this, well, he was on the bridge. I just, it just makes me laugh. Because when, you know, we've all had this experience sitting here.
One of the yeah, sorry.
Oh, no. We've all had this experience sitting here questioning that, and people are trying to question us. It's like, we understand the politics and we've studied. And then just that moment, I feel like, is encapsulated in not only US history, but in the present tense. Like, Bill Clinton is representative of that. So is Obama. So are all Biden, all of these people. And then of course Obama goes and does the same thing that he's done, and does this whole, you know, what people call virtue signaling. And so this, it's just like, you Negroes, like you, and that's all it was. So I love that people who say they support John Lewis, people who claim to be anti-racist, all of these people did not question that. And I feel like what Bill Clinton said was a synopsis of the whole thing. I really do. So I don't know when you saw that or read it, or if you've had conversations with people around it, what were some things people said to you? Was there an actual defense of what Clinton said? Did people just try to skirt around it? I don't know how people could do that, but I'm sure it has occurred.
You know, I saw, you know, I didn't see as many people trying to defend it as I saw weak criticisms of it. When I saw Clinton do it, I loved it. When I saw the clip, I couldn't stop laughing. I was like, thank you, this is perfect. You know, I used it in my classes and everything, because I said, this is the state telling you, we have preferred versions of Blackness and struggle. We will kill some of you and we'll praise some of you. Some of you could become Congress people and even president, and others of you will get exiled and shot in the head. So you can go the congressman route, or you can go, we give you cancer and you die route. I mean, so John Lewis said in his own memoir, when he was the head of SNCC and went all around Africa, every African leader said, if you're anywhere to the right of Malcolm X, we don't even want to talk to you. So he said Malcolm had become the standard internationally of Black politics, Black movement building. He also understood, because he saw what happened to Malcolm, what happened to Dr. King. He was intimately aware of Dr. King's radical transformation and Dr. King's own speeches to the head of SCLC and other movement leadership groups. Like, Lewis knew what King was saying about socialism and capitalism, and why the civil rights movement wasn't working, and why, you know, the anti-colonial struggles of the world were where Black people needed to be finding their solutions. He knew all of that, and then he saw King get his head blown off. So he said, I mean, it's the same thing we were just talking about. He made the political choice that Dyson made academically. I'm not going to be some random marginalized nationalist that gets shot in the head and left on the balcony. I'm going to be a congressman. And I'm going to go to, even when I was a high school teacher in Southwest DC, I'm going to go to the high schools that Jared Ball is teaching at and tell his students, with my Coca-Cola sponsorship, Bill Clinton, and say, thank you, because you saved us from Stokely, who was obviously, even in the minds of the counterintelligence program, the heir of Malcolm X after Malcolm was assassinated. He was one of that few listed as the next wave of threats. So I thought it was great and very telling. And the problems that I saw mostly were in the critiques of it that didn't focus enough on who Stokely was, who Kwame Ture was, or what made Kwame more of a threat to Bill Clinton than John Lewis. It wasn't that he stood at, like what we were just talking about with the movie. It wasn't that he just stood in a jacket and a beret and talked about guns and screaming about white people. He was an anti-colonialist and an internationalist, and he hated capitalism. That's what gets you put on those lists, and that's what gets people paid a lot of money, like Peniel Joseph, to write books about you that leave you named Stokely, that act like everything you did after 1968 was irrelevant and immature and made you marginal. And when, as few people like me try to point out, there's nowhere in the African world you can go where Peniel Joseph is more known or welcome than Kwame Ture. Nowhere. And if any pocket in the diaspora like that exists, I don't want to be there anyway. I'm not going. So, but I mean it. There's nowhere in the African world where Kwame Ture is less known or less appreciated than Peniel Joseph. Nowhere. So this idea that he became more marginal because he moved away from traditional mainstream civil rights politics is but that's part of the posthumous hit job. First of all, how can you be a top scholar paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to be the nominal spokesperson on these histories, and you write a book about the man and you don't even acknowledge his own autobiography? Just academically, as a scholar, that is unacceptable and inexcusable. I don't even care what you say about the man after that. If you don't even acknowledge his own autobiography, your scholarship is garbage. It's pure garbage. So but that's anyway. But the Peniels of the world represent the process that the state engages in to destroy the memories and the histories of these people who they tried to destroy when they were alive. So that's why I'm saying they're not gonna target you for assassination and gun you down and then see that you survived the drug-induced assassination, put another bullet in your head, and then 40 years later make a movie that depicts that in its accuracy and context. So it doesn't, especially when we've had no revolutionary process to take over political power, to be in control of the processes of making these movies. So why would we, so that's what I'm saying. So all of this work is done, and then I'll end here, so that when successive generations want to come to terms with the oppression that they're still going to be suffering, they can't immediately find, or they're not encouraged to immediately find the resources and sources of inspiration and analysis that they need. They're going to get facsimiles and mirages if they search for them at all, and they're going to get products that are made for white people with money to feel comfortable. And then they're going to have to go through the process of deconstructing all of that, as many of us have had to do previously, and to start the process from scratch. And that's what the intent is. Speaking of that Peniel thing, in my critique of Peniel's book, I criticized Robin Kelly and Gerald Horne for blurbing positively about that book, because I was saying it makes it harder for people like me to critique it. And sure enough, not long ago, a white left, I'll even just say, look, Aaron Mate interviewed Peniel Joseph a couple months ago. And I contacted Aaron and I said, look, man, I respect your work, man. And I know this isn't your area. And in fact, he was interviewing him after this Bill Clinton incident because he wanted to clarify why was Stokely. So he went and found and get to my point, because they don't engage Black radical scholarship. he finds the one Black scholar who wrote about Stokely. And I said to Aaron, I know you didn't read the book. I know you don't know these, so I'm just trying to, help you out. Aaron wrote back to me and said, and not even did say, he sent me a screenshot of Gerald Horne's praise for that book. And he said, Gerald Horne is a superstar. And he said, supported the book. So why would I, basically he was saying, why would I listen to you?
It's the academic equivalent of, I got a Black friend, so.
And in this case, I already have the Black friend. I got Gerald Horne. Who the hell is Jared? Who the hell is Jared? Why do I need another one who isn't as good coming in here messing up my whole flow? So my point is, I was right that I was actually punished by the correctness of my own analysis, which was that Peniel's work is meant to do just that. It's meant so that when white people with money read it, they accept it, and the challenges that come against it are already predisposed to be defended against, because we've already heard from Peniel, and Robin Kelly and Gerald Horne supported him. Who the hell? How could you? It's an unassailable book at that point. I mean, I don't know if I don't even know who would be big enough to overcome Gerald Horne, Robin Kelly. Yeah, I don't think so. Anyway,
so we got one or two more questions for you.
All right, but we gotta keep it quick though. I'm running out of time, unfortunately. But go ahead. I'll be shorter in my answers.
All right, yeah, I think one of the questions I just want to go over, hopefully it doesn't necessitate for a long answer, but when reading The Myth and Propaganda of Black Buying Power, I just wanted to kind of discuss the term buying power. I know you kind of talked about the term buying power being a contradiction in itself, and just to pull up some quotes, buying power will be made fully synonymous with political power. Buying power would also become a crucial part of the mechanism of managing Black rage and potential uprising in the years following the release of Johnson's marketing product. So I just kind of wanted to have you elaborate on the fact that, buying power, how dangerous it is, and also the contradiction within it, and also do you see a shift in the myth of the Black buying power and how it's propagated?
So, first of all, the phrase buying power is misunderstood. Buying power is a marketing and ad concept. It is meant only to measure the ability of any group to enrich those who are selling the products being advertised or sold. Buying power is not a measurement of income or wealth. It is not a measurement of the economic strength of any group, including Black people. But because it has been weaponized in a particular way against Black people have been conditioned to believe that it is reflective of a dormant and latent economic strength, literate or responsible. The reason the myth was weaponized, as I try to go over in my book, is for two reasons. One, so that a Black business and media class could rake in white corporate advertising dollars by convincing white America that Black people earned enough to buy their products. And so that white America in the state could convince Black people not to become revolutionaries, and that through a middle class aspiration and consumption pattern, they could live, the middle. The short answer to your last question is no, there's been no change, and I don't suspect, because the purpose of the myth is to make it seem as though capitalism and American dream fantasy mythology is real and can offer hope for Black people. And because Black people will always be targeted until there's a revolution for exploitation, there have to be constant new ways to rebrand the old effort of convincing Black people through symbol and myth that freedom is around the corner, as long as you don't rebel and don't organize and don't vote outside of the Democratic Party and don't, whatever, all of these other things. So if you don't become socialist, don't become Pan-Africanist, just stay Democrats and start a business and you'll figure it out. And that's so it's all part of what we're talking about here. It's part of an array of approaches to managing. One of the things that is, I don't think I have done enough to appreciate role and propaganda has, just right, just like Fanon said, right after the physical annihilation of a population comes the mental, psychological manipulation. And that's what we're dealing with now. And whenever that doesn't work, here come the police, here comes the National Guard, here come, the intelligence agencies, and they mop up the mess, and that's what they're ultimately working to do here. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that's just the last question to wrap it up. So I guess what's next for you, Dr. Jared Ball? Any new books or anything upcoming? I know you have these episodes reoccurring on your site and through your YouTube page, but is there anything brewing up next for you?
Thanks. Honestly, no, not that I can, nothing concrete yet in terms of research writing projects. And just probably more of the live stream media work and grassroots organization support for that as well. But I don't know what the next, I haven't figured that part out yet. I should have by now, but I haven't focused and gotten, what's the word I'm looking for? What's the word I'm looking for? Focused or I don't know. I can't think of the word I'm looking for. Organized, or I haven't to do that kind of thing yet. But I'm taking this new position in Africana Studies within Morgan State, so I want to see what room that creates for whatever the next project will be. But but that said, I greatly appreciate this conversation, and you alluded to it before, but I would be happy to come back and do more. I have always been somewhat adjacent to, because I haven't found a thriving, functioning chapter or whatever, but to the A-APRP, and the analyses that come out of that are always strong. So I definitely want to support that work as well. And I thank you both very much for having me.
Thank you so much, Jared Ball. And you're going to continue to mix what you like.
Yeah. No doubt. Absolutely.
And we will
absolutely.
Post your information too.
No, I appreciate that. And please do keep me in the loop with the work that you're doing. I would love to build with you all again, and at some point host you on my platform as well. I mean, I definitely want to support and try to encourage more to join these kinds of organizations. In the A-APRP, I mean, it don't get no better than Teray and Nkrumah. So, I mean,
you're right.
I mean, if you're going to follow anybody, you're going to join something, why not join what they put down? Like, and get busy. So anyway, thank you both very much. Yeah.
Thank you. And I'll send you information about the hoodie.
Definitely. Please. Because that joint, it tricked me at first too. I was like, okay, I'm cool. I like woo. That's not woo. That's A-APRP.
Thank you, Jared.
Thank you, Jared. Appreciate it. Forward ever.
All right, take care now. All right, peace, everybody. Yes, indeed. Forward ever.